there are a few things that make me judge someone's rifle, and just that I talk about it to hopefully annoy somebody. And so the goal here is just triggering people. First thing I want to talk about is the muzzle device. For the bulk of my training, I'm going to use a form of flash hider just because it doesn't do me any favors in terms of how it controls recoil. My favorite one is the 3-prong or the 4-prong devices, just because from a recoil standpoint, it's not making the gun recoil any less, and the direction of the recoil is mostly straight back, or maybe it recoils upwards a little bit, but it's not doing a ton to help me out. The other device I like is just the regular A2 style bird cage. A2 flash hider, that's what a lot of people would know it by. These, sometimes you get them for like $5 online. They're super cheap, or some guns just come with them. This is good to go also. Its job is to reduce flash, but it doesn't compensate for recoil in any way. It's got vents along the top, the bottom's solid. The only down part with this is when you're shooting, it does push down on the gun a little bit, especially at distance. I can tell where the dots, the pattern of it's recoiling downwards a little bit. And I prefer the 3 or 4 prong just because it feels more neutral, like the gun's pointing, recoiling straight back or upwards a little bit, but not helping me at all. So it falls on me to manage the recoil well to shoot the gun straight. The one I like the least is the muzzle brake. So what this is, vents on the side, ports on the top. This thing's going to shoot gas out from both sides and vent gas out the top. So it's just changing this on your rifle, if nothing else, does a ton to reduce recoil. So from a gamer perspective, it makes sense. But for me, training, I'm going to put this on a rifle at some point just because I want to see what I can get away with. And I think it'll be fun to kind of, I don't know, cheat mode, I suppose, an easy mode on one of my rifles. But if someone does the bulk of their training with this and they're wanting to accomplish anything other than like gamer stuff, or I see people training like military and law enforcement, but posting videos shooting one of these, I'm not a fan. I don't like the look of it at all because this is not appropriate for duty. It makes the gun recoil way less. The other thing I notice is if you shoot a drill with this and with this, you're gonna get a way different result. So shooting a gun with a muzzle brake and then getting the performance that you could get with a 3-prong out of it isn't really something to be super boastful about. So shooting something like this makes the gun recoil a lot less and softer. It is louder, but shooting a gun with a muzzle brake, I would then be trying to push much beyond what I could do with a regular duty style rifle, trying to go faster, putting the targets farther away, tighter targets or tighter partials, really trying to push the limits of what I can do, trying to do things I can't do with a regular flash hider gun. The other thing to talk about is triggers. So I am a fan of 2-stage triggers or mil-spec. Mil-spec, just as it sounds, I suppose military spec, but they're a little bit gritty. Some are smoother, some are not, but it's more or less a standard trigger. The 2-stage triggers are nice. I like the Geisley stuff a lot. So this has a first stage, take up to a wall, then after that, keep pressing, and it breaks. They're still very nice. A lot of people I know that use guns professionally use those triggers, those Geisley triggers. It's super nice, but there's an amount of safety built into this, whereas if I started to press on the trigger, but I didn't want the gun to go off, at least I have a little bit of give or leeway compared to some of the triggers where there's nothing at all, where that you just touch the trigger, there's basically no over travel, and then it breaks. Again, it kind of depends on what your goal is and what you hope to accomplish. If it's shooting competitively, that stuff makes a lot of sense. But for training military or law enforcement, it's not the look I would want anyway. So the trigger is going to play an amount of effect on what you're able to get away with. The other thing, just from a setup height or setup perspective, is optics height. I greatly prefer either absolute co-witness or lower third is my favorite. I've got one of my guns set up with a 193 just because I want to test it some, just to get more time with one and just an experiment, I suppose. I don't like it at all. If truth be told, if I had my choice, it'd be a 193, or I'm sorry, a lower third would be my choice, just because it just feels like the rifle just melts into my shoulder and it all becomes, I don't know, connected, I suppose, a part of my shoulder. So I like because I've got connection, my cheeks touching the stock, and it just feels like, again, I have more control. Some of the taller mounts, anything over the 193, the 22 kind of stuff, some of those really tall Unity stuff, you end up shooting with it where, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but your chin is almost off the stock. This just makes it way tougher. I've done some shooting with daylight visible lasers and IR lasers, and trying to shoot from something like this, even with an infrared laser or daylight, it's super tough just because you don't have the same amount of connection, and the gun recoils more in different ways. So anyway, my choice for optic height would be lower third or 193 if you like, but I would not go any taller than that. So anyway, yeah, I mean, I guess hopefully I irritated somebody. In the end, it depends on what you're using the gun for. Mission dictates gear. So if it's for practical shooting, getting the low mass bolts, adjustable gas system, muzzle brake, all that stuff makes sense. But if it's just a duty style rifle or just a regular training rifle, I prefer something like this. This is an ADM, so the gun's super fly and very nice, but it's still set up a lot like a duty gun. Maybe it kicks just a bit less than a BCM or something else, but in the end, it's pretty comparable. And anyway, that's what I feel like I learned the most with, just because of the gun not doing me any favors and me getting, rewarded with things I don't want if I compromise my technique. I stop paying attention to the inputs I should have and just try to go on autopilot with the gun. So anyway, I think this is the best kind of setup for learning. So anyway, hopefully that annoys someone. If you have questions, drop them in the comments.